Hans Christian Andersen, the fairy tale master who wrote The Little Mermaid, The Ugly Duckling, and The Little Match Girl, spent his entire life living in torment and fear. He was terrified of falling ill, of fires, and of shipwreck. He had a severe fear of heights, was constantly anxious about missing trains or losing his ID, and worried about accidentally leaving important files tucked inside books. He worried whether he had blown out the candles, whether he took the right dosage of medication, or if he placed a letter in the wrong envelope. He was perpetually trapped in a state of panic, constantly exhausted, quick to anger, and ultimately remained unmarried his whole life due to his extreme psychological instability. Yet, a man so deeply tormented by mental anguish created some of the most beautiful fairy tales the world has ever known. This leads to a fascinating question. Are those whom we view as mentally unstable or teetering on the edge simply foolish, or are they geniuses gifted with extraordinary abilities? What is the real connection between genius and mental illness? Welcome to this episode of Mind and Meaning. I'm your host. A journalist once interviewed a highly skilled psychiatrist. After a long conversation, the reporter remembered an old story and asked, "I've heard before that if a completely healthy person ended up in a psychiatric hospital, they'd get trapped there because all their normal actions would be viewed as symptoms of illness. Whether taking notes, talking normally, or chatting with others, the doctors would see it as a psychotic episode. So today, how do you actually determine if a patient has fully recovered?" The doctor looked at the journalist and replied, "I once posed a question to my patients. I asked them, if a bathtub is full of water, which is faster to drain it, a spoon or a bucket?" The journalist cut in. "A normal person would say a bucket, right?" The doctor looked at him with a bewildered expression and said, "No, a healthy person would just pull the plug." Of course, that's just a joke and shouldn't be taken seriously. But embedded in it is a common misconception. Many people assume that those with mental illness or psychological issues must be slow-witted or lack normal reasoning. In reality, that is completely false. Taking patients with schizophrenia as an example, their minds often work in far broader ways. They possess vivid imaginations and rapid critical thinking. A madman is by no means a fool. Throughout history, countless accolades and monumental achievements have actually belonged to individuals living with schizophrenia. So, what is the link between genius and insanity? Professor Vladimir Efremenson from the Moscow Research Institute of Psychiatry firmly concluded after extensive research, there is indeed an unmistakable link between genius and mental illness. This wasn't just wild speculation. Consider the data. Dr. Felix Post analyzed 300 renowned historical figures through the lens of modern psychopathology and revealed striking findings. 17% of political leaders showed clear psychiatric traits, figures like Hitler, Lincoln, and Napoleon. 18% among scientists, including Francis Galton, Gregor Mendel, André-Marie Ampère, Nicolaus Copernicus, and Michael Faraday. 26% among thinkers like Bertrand Russell, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Arthur Schopenhauer. 31% among composers such as Richard Wagner, Giacomo Puccini, and Robert Schumann. 37% among painters, including Vincent van Gogh and Pablo Picasso. And the highest proportion was among novelists and poets at an astonishing 46%, including William Faulkner, Marcel Proust, D.H. Lawrence, Mikhail Lermontov, as well as Chinese poets like Gu Cheng and Hai Ji. All of these individuals exhibited pathologically significant mental illness traits, with a particularly high prevalence of schizophrenia. To clarify, what exactly is schizophrenia? Many people often confuse schizophrenia with split personalities, dissociative identity disorder, but they are entirely different conditions. Schizophrenia refers to a group of severe mental disorders with complex and unsettled causes, though a person's underlying psychological vulnerability combined with stressful environmental factors are widely acknowledged to play key roles. It typically develops slowly or subacutely during young adulthood, manifesting clinical syndromes across multiple areas: perception, thought process, emotion, and behavior, alongside a general desynchronization of mental activity. While patients generally maintain clear consciousness and basic intelligence, some experience cognitive impairment over the course of the illness. The progression is often prolonged, characterized by recurring episodes or worsening conditions. Some eventually experience mental decline, though others can maintain full or partial recovery with proper treatment. Thus, schizophrenia is complex in its causes and diverse in its symptoms, affecting perception, thinking, emotion, willpower, behavior, and cognitive functioning, with wide variations from person to person. Currently, psychologists and psychiatrists have outlined several core symptoms of schizophrenia: hallucinations. Patients may experience various perceptual disturbances, most prominently hallucinations, including auditory, visual, olfactory, gustatory, and tactile. Auditory hallucinations are the most common. Delusions. Delusions are the most frequent and significant disruption to thought content. Common forms include persecutory, relational, influence, jealous, grandiose, or non-hereditary delusions. It's estimated that up to 80% of individuals with schizophrenia experience persecutory delusions, which can range from mild feelings of insecurity to intense paranoia about being watched, ostracized, poisoned, or murdered, frequently driving defensive or aggressive behaviors. Emotional disturbances. Emotional blunting and inappropriate affect are the most common emotional symptoms. Additionally, uncoordinated excitement, irritability, depression, and anxiety are frequently observed. Passivity and apathy. Most patients experience reduced or absent willpower, leading to decreased activity, social withdrawal, and passive behavior. They lack drive and initiative, lose interest in work or studies, show no concern for their future, and rarely follow through on plans if they make any at all. Cognitive dysfunction. Cognitive deficits are highly prevalent in schizophrenia, affecting approximately 85% of patients. These include disordered information processing, selective attention issues, and executive dysfunction. Tasks assigned by others are often ignored, unexecuted, or flatly refused. If schizophrenia causes so many profound challenges, how does it connect to genius? Let's break it down step by step. First, while hallucinations disrupt reality, they also allow patients to view issues and the world itself from entirely unconventional angles. Similarly, runaway thoughts are simply an extreme manifestation of divergent thinking. A small subset of patients with racing, chaotic thoughts possess breathtaking imaginations. When absorbed in a specific domain, their thinking becomes extraordinarily innovative and boundary-pushing. Furthermore, individuals with schizophrenia often live isolated lives, struggle socially, and experience heightened emotions. Yet, when alone, they can often focus far more deeply than the average person. Unburdened by mundane societal distractions or the energy required for daily networking, their lives remain relatively simple, allowing them to channel their concentration entirely into their work. Finally, and most importantly, some individuals with schizophrenia may actually hold an advantage in terms of brain hardware. Genetic scientists researching human DNA discovered an intriguing phenomenon. Individuals with anomalies on chromosome 15 are far more susceptible to anxiety disorders and panic conditions. Researchers analyzing 120 patients suffering from clinical depression, as well as suicide victims, found a strong correlation between these genetic mutations and suicidal tendencies. Yet, that very same genetic abnormality can also serve as a massive catalyst for an intellectual quantum leap, fueling the emergence of genius. In other words, geniuses have a statistically higher probability of developing schizophrenia. Additionally, Dr. Bruce Miller in the U.S. studied 72 patients who suffered brain damage from various causes and discovered that the human genius button resides in a specific area of the right anterior temporal lobe. Normally, this area is suppressed by specific neurons. However, when those neurons are damaged or die off, a person's creative potential can be fully released. Scientists have identified what is known as the error-correcting neuron system, which serves as an internal prevention mechanism within the brain. Its purpose is to keep human behavior within conventional bounds. Whenever a radical new thought emerges, these neurons intervene to prevent overly outrageous behavior, acting as the brain's mechanism for reason and self-control. But when this mechanism malfunctions, extraordinary ideas and brilliant theories pour out relentlessly alongside other wild thoughts and pathological traits. We know that genetics and external trauma can trigger schizophrenia, but we rarely realize that these very factors can also act as the key to unlocking the doors of genius. Science supports the notion that there is indeed a fine line between genius and madness. To illustrate this, the king of fairy tales, Hans Christian Andersen, was psychologically far from sound. Andersen suffered from mania and intense anxiety. He was terrified of illness, fires, and shipwrecks. He suffered from severe acrophobia, worried constantly about missing trains or losing his ID, and feared leaving important papers inside books. He worried about unextinguished candles, taking incorrect medication doses, or mailing letters in the wrong envelopes. In short, he lived in perpetual state of distress. Once, while traveling, a friend arrived 30 minutes late. Upon arriving, the friend found the brilliant author completely exhausted and in utter despair. In those 30 minutes, Andersen's mind had raced through endless dark scenarios, ranging from his friend's death to planning his funeral. It was said he could spend entire days weeping at home. Terrified of women, he remained a virgin throughout his life. Normally, he felt perpetually fatigued and was easily angered, yet it was a man with such an intensely unstable inner world who penned enduring masterpieces like The Little Mermaid. Of course, not every person with schizophrenia is a genius. For many patients, their unique talents are impractical or go unnoticed. For instance, clinical cases document a female patient who could distinguish a vast array of subtle color shades, far better than a neurotypical person, yet lacked the ability to express or utilize this talent. While geniuses are more prone to schizophrenia, individuals with schizophrenia are also uniquely positioned to become geniuses. This extraordinary overlap may seem perplexing, but viewed from another angle, it makes sense. Individuals with these psychological and personality differences possess traits that ordinary people simply do not: unwavering focus, uncompromising tenacity, bolder ideas, and unprecedented leaps in thought. Whether it is Hans Christian Andersen, tormented by inner chaos his entire life, or the painters and poets who created masterpieces amidst visions and wild thoughts, they show us the profound, unexplored depths of the human psyche in the most extraordinary ways. Geniuses are more vulnerable to mental illness, yet mental differences can unexpectedly tear open the door to genius. While this mystery remains awe-inspiring, looking at it differently reveals a simple truth. Individuals with these psychological differences possess qualities that ordinary people lack: unwavering focus, uncompromising tenacity, bolder vision, and extraordinary leaps in thought. Perhaps it was precisely that unstable inner world, so out of step with the ordinary, that allowed them to see landscapes we cannot see, hear voices we cannot hear, and write fairy tales that we could never hope to write. Thank you for listening to Mind and Meaning. See you next time.